Without much delay, I opened the large steel sliding door that gave access into the steel mill where I lived, pulling my dirt bike out and putting on my helmet, getting ready for the trip. Emily, of course, taking a seat on the back of the bike with me. The whole time, the only thing going through my mind were basically blueprints, ways to strip down the XPC and use its parts to build my bike. The only real problem being how advanced it was. I mean, outside of the walls, there's nobody who has anything biotech. At least not anything that was made until after the war. Biotech has existed for a very long time, but they primarily made electric engines until sometime after the walls went up. I don't know when it was. When you don't have access to information from inside of the walls, it's hard to tell, but sometime within the last decade or so, radical advancements have been made. It might have been sooner than that, and we just didn't see the results outside of the walls. But a little over 10 years ago, people started spotting the XPCs, the brand new state-of-the-art guard units, constructed to patrol and protect the walls from intruders and such. These things are death machines to the highest degree, built for war. They can withstand basically anything. I've heard of them taking rocket launchers and still moving. They are not a game to be toyed with. And that's even dating back to the first generation. These robotic war machines were much more streamlined than their bulky pre-war counterparts. These things were fast, and damn fast at that. They didn't move around on wheels or anything like that. They weren't like tanks rolling around on treads. No, they were basically human-like robots. I say human-like, but that's basically only because they have arms and legs. Proportionally, they're sized much differently. They move more like a wild animal than a machine. And if one of them puts those steel claws into you, you're a dead man. And that's not even including all of their weaponry. State-of-the-art plasma rifles, damn near impenetrable armor that's lighter than anything else. Pulse rifles, impact cannons, all safely tucked away inside of shifting armor. These things were death incarnate. I don't know, for the life of me, what the hell could actually damage one. I've heard of entire gangs going on suicide runs to try to take one of these things out, and barely making a scratch before they all die. And the kicker on top of all of it, for what makes the XPC state-of-the-art, is the third-generation biotech engine powering it. I've never actually seen one. I've only heard stories. According to what we do know about biotech engines, at least the new kind, the kind nobody outside of the walls gets to see, is that they're made with some sort of radically advanced tech. Nanotechnology. A massive system of microscopic machines somehow works to make it function. And supposedly, rather than being based off regular machine parts, biotech engines and all of the parts that work with them are designed to be a split, a divide between the functionality of biological organisms and machines, a cross between the two, resulting in an effect greater than either, able to generate more power than anybody knows what to do with. So of course they put it into a freaking death machine. That just sounds badass. Who wouldn't do that? But the thoughts just kept rolling through as I start up my bike and we start to head down towards Al's Auto. If we were going to be picking up a drop of heavy tech, then we'd need something to transport it. Meaning, the reason she really came to me was most likely because she needs me to talk to Al. He has a heavy-duty hauler that we often use to transport vehicles and things like that for the people that need repairs and things. We're definitely not going to stay in a gang-infested hovel while we're fixing those vehicles. He transports them to us. And if we were going to pick up all this weapons, gear, and that XPC, we needed to get Al to let us use the transport. The only question being whether he'd actually do it or not. That grumpy old bastard wasn't known for being easy to get anything out of. Eventually, we made our way all the way to Al's auto. It was late, and of course all the lights were off. But that wouldn't be a problem, since he knew who I was. Me and that old bastard have been working together for over a decade now. Since I was about 14, in fact. Come to think of it, I probably passed up my birthday here recently. Regardless, me and Emily hopped off the bike and walked up to the door, knocking on it and waiting for Al to wake his ass up. After a short time, I started to hear clicking outside of the door. From the other side, I could hear Al unlocking all of the multiple latches and chains that held the door safely in place. As the door opened, Al gave a customary greeting that you could always expect from him. "What the hell do you want, brat? You have any idea what time it is? It's the freaking weekend," Al said, glaring out of the door at me. Looking just past me and seeing Emily standing there. "Oh, and it looks like you brought your girlfriend too. This is a little unusual. Usually you don't actually bring her over. I just see her talking to you, but she keeps her distance. So, what brings you here?" "We need to come in and talk to you, Al. We've got, well, something that needs doing, and we're wondering if you could do us a favor. We could probably compensate you fairly for it, of course." "Ugh, fine. Only because it's you, kid. If you're anybody else, I'll tell you to get freaking lost. Luckily for you, I have a soft spot for your stupid ass. Well, don't just stand there letting all my cool air out. Get your asses in here," Al shouted, opening the door and waving us in. Yep, Al's welcoming personality never changes. I'm convinced he's going to be scowling in his coffin. If the old bastard ever actually dies, I'm starting to think he's immortal. I mean, he must be pushing 80 by now. But that doesn't stop him from throwing a temper tantrum whenever something doesn't go his way. I've dodged many a screwdriver or wrench thrown in his little tantrums. As we entered in, Al closed the door behind us, throwing back on all of the latches, before walking over and turning on a lamp next to a desk that he kept in the front area, sitting down in his chair, wearing his old guy nightgown. For a moment I was a little grossed out, because the thought of whether he was wearing clothes under that crossed my mind. And I felt yesterday's dinner start to come back up for a minute. Ugh, that's a nightmare I don't want to think about. "Okay, kid, so why are you here?" Al said, lighting up a cigarette and leaning back in his chair. Emily stepped forward for a moment. "Well, Mr. Al, right? I can call you that, right?" Emily said. "Sure, girlie. Call me whatever you want, as long as you don't call me a sucker." Yeah, Emily replied. "Well, Mr. Al, we were wondering if you'd let us use your transport. We find ourselves in need to haul something, so we were wanting to rent it for a short time." Of course, we'll fairly compensate you for it. A rental fee shouldn't be that much, Emily said, slightly quaintly, smiling and acting very feminine. Emily was a looker, and she definitely knew how to use it. She always played up the dainty, nice girl part whenever she was cutting these deals. I don't think people really realize how much leeway they tend to give her because she looks pretty. Add in her business sense on top of that, and cutting a deal with Emily tends to always favor her. Al lit up his cigarette and took a long drag. So you say you want to use my hauler. So, what is it exactly you're hauling, little girl? He said, giving a serious focus to Emily. It didn't appear that Al was buying into her sweet girl routine. He may be an old codger, but he's not a dumb one.